This is Research Like a Pro, episode 367, The Nurturing Legacy of My Second Great-Grandmother, Alice Frazier Harris. Welcome to Research Like a Pro, a genealogy podcast about taking your research to the next level, hosted by Nicole Dyer and Diana Elder, accredited genealogist professional. Diana and Nicole are the mother-daughter team at FamilyLocket.com and the authors of Research Like a Pro, a genealogist guide. With Robin Worthland, they also co-authored the companion volume, Research Like a Pro with DNA. Join Diana and Nicole as they discuss how to stay organized, make progress in their research, and solve difficult cases. Let's go! Today's episode is sponsored by newspapers.com. Hi everyone, welcome to Research Like a Pro.
Hi Nicole, how are you doing today?
I am doing so well. On the date of recording this, I heard back from the Board for Certification of Genealogists that the first part of my application has passed, and the judges all voted. There were 3 judges, and they voted to approve my application. So now I can go on to part 2, and I was so excited and relieved. It's been 6 months since I turned it in on December 31st, 2024. So I've been kind of taking a break from working on it and waiting. And today I heard back. So it was a great day.
Well, congratulations. That is a huge milestone. And aren't you so glad you could just do the first part of it? And now you know what you need to do for the second half. So why don't you tell all of our listeners the 3 parts that you had to complete first, or how you chose to divide it up?
Well, I didn't get to choose. So the way that the program works is that you do development activities, which is like a resume of your genealogical education, and the document work, which is a transcription of a historical document in the region that you requested, and a research plan that goes along with that transcription, and then a 3-generation kinship determination project that follows like one family through 3 generations, and then proving the kinship while placing the couples in their historical context to fully identify them. So that was by far the longest work sample for this part. So for the first part, I had to submit those 3, and it had to fit within 75 pages. And then the second part now is due within a year, and that will include a proof argument case study, which is also another one that could potentially be long, and a research report, which I'm trying to keep simple so that it isn't quite as long. So I have plenty of space for my case study, because the second part also has to fit within 75 pages for a total of 150 pages.
Well, you should be able to do that. That's 75 pages. That's very doable, don't you think?
I just always write too much. And I struggled at the last minute right before turning it in to get my KDP to be shorter.
I bet. So does your research report supposed to be for a certain amount of hours, like a 20-hour research project, or
No,
how's
it
that
just
work?
has an objective. It has to be a report for someone else, and it has to have a specific research objective. And you do have to state in the report what the limitations were, but it doesn't have to be like somebody could just do a 5-hour research report. I don't know why you'd want to, though, because that's too short to really showcase your skills.
Yeah.
I mean, the limitations I'm putting in mine are not hours, because I didn't want to be limited to hours. I just put in like a time frame.
Oh,
Like, I'll
okay.
get this back to you in a year or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's nice. That's
Pro
nice.
bono, so you can have a little more freedom about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's exciting. And it's great that you have another deadline, so that a year from now, you'll be staying up late getting it finished. Or maybe you'll have it in early.
Well, actually, you can do a 1-year extension if you don't finish it by that deadline. So
Oh, okay. Okay.
I have 2 years,
That's
but
good.
I think I'm going to try to hit that deadline, because why drag it out?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really wise to do as much as you can. And then if you need the extension, you're well on your way, instead of just
Yeah.
not
Like
doing
maybe I'll need 1 more month to wait for the record to
exactly.
come back. Then I
Yeah.
can. But if you wait till the second deadline, you have nothing
Yeah. You definitely
after that.
definitely want to shoot for the first deadline. And then if you have to
Good
extend,
advice.
yep. Yep.
Well, as you can tell, I'm just giddy about that. So I'm really happy and excited. It feels like I've completed the whole thing, but I have to keep reminding myself that this is just the first half, and I need to keep working on the second half.
So in case the second time you don't pass, do you just do that again, the case study and the report? How does that work?
Yes, I think so. I'd have to check with the application guide and stuff, because so when I turned in my first half of the portfolio, it was under the pilot program for the 2-part submission process. And now they've adopted it as the way that they'll use it going forward. So they're getting rid of the option to submit all 4 of your work samples at once. I think that ends in a few months, like in September maybe. And they're publishing a new application guide that's coming out really soon, might already be out in July. And so the new application guide will have all the rules about that, but I'm pretty sure, I don't know. I feel like you can just redo your last part. You don't have to redo the first part.
Well, that would make sense if you've already proven that you can do the first part. And I would imagine most people that pass the first part also pass the second because you've already learned to do the reasonably exhaustive research and how to do your citations and writing. And you can take all the feedback from the first one and apply it to the second part. So I don't think you'll have any problem. Well, let's go ahead and do our announcements for the day. We're excited about our August webinar, which will be Tuesday, August 19th at 11 a.m. Mountain. And this is presented by Torhild Shirley. The title is Tracing Carolius, Norwegian Research on a Double World War II Evacuee's Journey. And the description is born in northern Norway, Carolius Martin Jacobsen Vessel spent most of his adult life in the coal mines on the island of Svalbard. During World War II, Germany's need for coal made Svalbard a targeted area and a dangerous place to live. Operation Gauntlet botched the German plans and Carolius was evacuated. He never saw his family again. Research in Norway and Scotland revealed more about his life and evacuation. And the topics will be Norway, Norwegian research, World War II, Operation Gauntlet, church records, census records, military records, Scotland, archival research, Svalbard, Store Norsk Spitsbergen. Wow, so many interesting topics. Well, a little bit about Torhild Shirley. She's a native Norwegian, an accredited genealogist professional, and the owner of ScandinavianFamily.com. Torhild has an associate's degree in technical translation from the University of Agder in Norway and an associate's degree in family history research from Brigham Young University, Idaho. Torhild has over 30 years of research experience and speaks 5 languages. She is fluent in all Scandinavian languages. In addition to research, Torhild is comfortable with the Old Gothic handwriting used in Scandinavian documents and can transcribe and translate documents as needed. She has translated many letters from family in the Old Country, journals, patriarchal blessings, will and probate documents, land records, and more. Torhild values honesty and hard work and will always do her best to meet and exceed a client's expectations. When not engrossed in research or translation, she enjoys gardening, camping, fishing, snowboarding, and spending time with her large family. And we are very fortunate to work with her on our Family Locket research team. The next study group begins August 27th, 2025, and registration is open, and it will end on August 21st. And the peer group leader application is on our website for complimentary registration if you'd like to join us in that regard. And then we invite you to join the newsletter that comes out each Monday with new posts, upcoming lectures, our coupon codes, and more.
Okay, great. Today we are talking about my second great grandmother. And Mom, this is your great grandmother, Alice Frazier Harris, who also went by Allie. She was a very special lady, and I wrote this blog post originally on Mother's Day. And I was thinking about her because she is someone I included in my kinship determination project. The Harris family was the family I focused on for my 3 generations to prove kinship and put them in historical context. And so I thought about her on Mother's Day. She was not only a mother and a grandmother to her own children and grandchildren, but also to many others. And she even cared for her son-in-law's baby sister after the infant's mother died in childbirth. And she was recognized for her nurturing nature towards many in her community. So she is my second great grandmother on my mom's side, like I said. She is the grandmother of my maternal grandfather, Bobby Jean Schultz. So that's my mom's dad. And so today, this discussion about her life comes from my kinship determination project. In the blog post that accompanies it, I have the exact text that I put into the KDP about her with some images that I added. I didn't have space in my KDP to include any pictures, but I had a lot of fun pictures of her that mom had scanned that she got from her parents. So it was great to be able to take what I had written about her in the KDP and put it together with the pictures we had.
Oh, that's so great. And I'm so pleased that you chose this family to work on and research, because I just loved all the details that you found about them, things that I had not researched, which is nice to have a research partner. Well, let's read a little bit about this. So it begins, Allie Frazier was born on 28 September 1886 in Montague County, Texas, a county with wide valleys and high prairies on the border with Indian Territory in northern Texas. And we have an image of her birth certificate. And this was such an interesting one because it's a delayed birth certificate. Texas was not doing birth certificates in 1886. So Allie had to go in much later in life to have this created, and it was in 1949. And she had to have her brother, E.T. Frazier, say that this was really true, that this had happened, and she had to, provide some proof of her birth. So it was neat to see that and to find that. And I remember when I found that, it was so exciting because that wasn't something that was passed down in the family. It was just out on Family Search under the delayed birth certificates.
Yeah, I thought the birth certificate was really interesting, getting down into the analysis of that and looking at it really closely and just reading all of the text that went with it. I hadn't really seen a lot of delayed birth certificates, so that one was really interesting to me. Well, Allie's parents were Richard Frazier and Nancy Briscoe. So Allie's father, Richard Frazier, was born March 12th, 1840 in Arkansas to parents from North Carolina and Tennessee. And Richard actually fought in the Civil War, so that was interesting. He was with Company A of the 12th Texas Cavalry. He entered the Army as a private in October of 1861 at age 24 and left as a corporal. He was an ensign for his company. Not too long after that, he married Nancy Briscoe in October 1863 in McDonald County, Missouri, where they lived until the 1870s. An aside about the source for this marriage date as October 1863 is that the source for that is actually Nancy Frazier's widow's application for a Confederate pension in Oklahoma. She was widowed and seeking that pension after he died. And so in it, she had to say when she married him. And so apparently she couldn't remember the exact day, but she did have the month and the year and the place. So that was great. And so continuing on about Allie's parents, Richard and Nancy continued living in the place where they got married, McDonald County, Missouri, until the 1870s. Then by 1880, they had moved to Cook County, Texas. And at that time, they had a large family of all boys, including John, William, Charles, Coleman, Austin, and Millard. And then in 1886, Richard bought 53 acres from W.D. and Isabella Davis in Montague County. Actually, it's in Montague County, Texas. Isn't that how you say it, Lauren?
Yeah.
Montague County for $227. And it was 15 miles northeast of the town of Montague, which I'm guessing you also say it like that for the town. Richard probably raised feed for the many cattle ranchers in the area, like most farmers did in that county. And Richard and Nancy sold the land he had purchased from W.D. Davis for $200 to B.W. Miller. So unfortunately, they sold it for less than they bought it for. Hopefully, they were doing okay, but maybe they decided to move on to greener pastures. When they sold the land, it was neat to see Richard and Nancy both signed with a mark, possibly because they hadn't learned to write very well. And then they crossed the northern Texas border and moved into Indian Territory, which would become Oklahoma. And the time of their move into Indian Territory was about 1887.
All right, well, let's talk about school years and marriage for Allie. When she was about 14, her family resided in Township 7 of Chickasaw Nation, Indian Territory. Their family of boys had welcomed 2 more sons and 3 daughters. So Elizabeth, Edmund, Alice, Albert, Minnie, and Sophia. And Alice was 13 years old and attending school along with her brothers Edmund and Albert. She then married Doc Harris in 1904, and they probably lived very close to each other. Richard Frazier was taxed in Pike in 1909, and Allie's father, Richard, died in 1911, and her mother, Nancy, passed away in 1924.
Right. So living in Indian Territory was probably a really interesting time as a teenager. And I did dive into that a bit in my kinship determination project, just kind of talking about how it was a little bit lawless at that time, and they had to bring in these federal courts to crack down on things. Well, it must have been hard being a mother in the Wild West at that time. But Allie was known as a gentle and sweet mother and grandmother, and she gave birth to 4 of her own children, but 2 of them passed away when they were young, we think. That's kind of what we pieced together from the records. Bert Cecil was the first child, born in 1905, and then Ettie Belle was born in 1907. So Ettie Belle is Mom's grandmother. And when they were living in Carlisle in Lubbock County, Texas, Ettie had married Charles Leslie Schultz, and he had a lot of siblings. And in fact, his mother gave birth to another child after they were married. So Eddie's husband's mother actually died in childbirth. So that was really sad. The child that she had was Christine Schultz. And Christine's father asked Alice and Doc Harris to keep the newborn for several months after Mrs. Schultz had died. And so this must have been a really sweet experience for Allie, who was probably grateful to have a little infant to hold and take care of because 2 of her babies had died. And the reason we know that she had 2 children who died is because her husband later was admitted to the Eastern State Hospital in Oklahoma. And his intake papers asked about how many children do you have and when were they born and what were their genders. So we know they had 2 male children who didn't live to adulthood. And I kind of like figured out when they would have died based on like correlating what it said in the hospital records with the census records that we had, and just kind of looking at the timing of the other pregnancies. I think that they were both born after Ettie Belle Harris. So probably the first boy that didn't live was born between 1908 and 1910, and the other boy was born in 1917, but died before 1920. So anyway, I thought, what a sweet experience for Allie to be able to take care of this little infant, Christine, who's her son-in-law's baby sister, who then kind of became like another one of their children almost. I know Christine was really close with them. She actually called them Grandma and Grandpa Harris and kind of viewed them as grandparents.
Right. And, not long after Christine was born, then Ettie Belle had her first child, CH. And so Christine and CH and my dad, Bob, and Helen, the 3 children of Ettie Belle, they just considered Christine more like a sister than an aunt. It was one of those situations where they were niece and nephew and aunt, but she was just like a year older than CH. And so they really, really more just like cousins or brothers and sisters. So very close family. Everybody was just very, very close.
Yeah, it was really neat to see how the 2 families of Ettie Belle, the Harris family, and then her husband, the Schultz family, how they were really so closely connected, especially during the challenging years of the Great Depression, and how they kind of supported each other. And it was just neat to see them all like moving together to many of the different places they lived and relying on each other. That family connection, their families were friends, and they considered them true relatives. And I don't think it's really like that as much anymore with in-laws. So, like, but it really seemed like those 2 families considered each other family.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's have a word from our sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by newspapers.com. Break down genealogy brick walls with a subscription to the largest online newspaper archive. Did you know newspapers.com has over 1 billion pages of digitized newspapers dating back to 1690? Their growing collection includes papers from the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and beyond. Discover birth and marriage announcements, obituaries, and everyday stories about your ancestors in seconds. Newspapers.com can help you fill in the gaps between vital records and reveal details about your ancestors' lives that you can't find anywhere else. Their easy-to-use search feature lets you filter your results by date, location, specific paper, and more. When you find something interesting, newspapers.com makes it a snap to share it with family and friends. You can even save it directly to your ancestry tree. Come explore 1 billion pages and make infinite discoveries today on newspapers.com. Use promo code FamilyLockup for a 20% discount on your subscription. Well, now we're going to talk a little bit about Allie's life as a grandmother, which is fun because I'm a grandmother now and I can relate to this part of her life now. So Eddie's second child, Bobby Jean Schultz, who was my dad, he was born in Sanger, Fresno County, California in 1927 at the home of his mother's parents, D.H. and Allie Harris. So the background to this is that in 1925, Eddie and Les had decided to move to California after a challenging year growing cotton in Lubbock, Texas. And Doc and Allie probably decided it would be better in California as well, but we don't know the exact date that they moved there. But we do know they moved there because of a newspaper article, which you were able to find, Nicole, which was so great. And that newspaper reported that they were living in Walton Colony in Sanger, which was probably a housing development. So we don't know what Doc did for work, but Les Schultz, his son-in-law, was picking lettuce, working in a grape vineyard, and working for a rancher. Doc and Allie didn't stay in Sanger, California long because by 1930 they were in Colorado, and they lived in Plum Valley in Los Animas County on a farm with Allie's brother, William C. Frazier, and his wife, Ella Mae. And Los Animas County was in southeastern Colorado, part of the High Plains. And I have driven through that county, and it's really neat. And I imagined as we were driving through that they would have been living out there somewhere. So we have fun stories about the snow that came in the winters. And, it's always fun to drive through the place you've read about. Well, a little bit more about Allie as a grandmother. When Doc was a patient of the Eastern Oklahoma State Hospital from 1941 to 1957, Allie lived with her daughter's family, Eddie and Les Schultz. And Eddie's daughter, Helen, remembered that her grandma Harris helped with the children and household work, even mending and ironing her husband's clothing. And Eddie's son, Bob, remembered that Grandma Harris made delicious cakes from scratch. They would fall in the middle, then there was lots of homemade frosting. And that's so funny that was my dad, that he would remember that because he really did love food. And I would make this fruit cocktail cake when I was, a young girl. And sometimes it would fall. And then we put that really good coconut frosting, for German chocolate cake, that kind of frosting on top and, fill in that hole. I would love that. It was so sweet. My goodness, so rich. Anyway, it's just fun, the things that people remember about grandparents. So Allie also made quilts and embroidered, and when she was on a trip in Oklahoma visiting family, she introduced her granddaughter Helen to her sister and family. They had a handicapped daughter at home, and Helen was impressed by the love that they saw in that family, which is so neat.
Yeah, I love that image of Allie taking her granddaughter to visit family and just like that grandma-granddaughter connection and introducing her to relatives and teaching her about the family and that kind of thing. It's just heartwarming. And I also love the part about her making quilts. And you make quilts for my kids, so you have a lot in common with your great-grandmother.
That is right. Yes, yes, that quilting was a big deal, and I do have some quilts, not from her, but from my aunts on the other side. They were very big quilters too, so I think it was something that was a necessity because we're talking Depression era, tough times. And if a piece of clothing wore out, you did not throw it away or make it a rag. You saved it and put it into a quilt because it was precious fabric.
Yeah, I wonder if anyone in the family has any of her quilts anymore. That would be fun to ask around.
It would be. The only one that I can think of that maybe would be Aunt Helen's daughter, because I know she
Yeah,
has a lot of the family things, because, the daughters often get that
right.
stuff.
Yeah.
And so I need to make a trip to go visit. I know that she's got a whole room of memorabilia and things, so I need to go check that out.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we need to go do that together.
That'd be fun.
Well, Allie passed away at age 70 on March 15th, 1957, in the Fresno County Hospital. After a funeral at Krieger Funeral Chapel, she was buried on March 18th in the Sanger Cemetery. Her obituary stated that she was survived by the widower, Doc Harris, a son, Bert Harris of Arizona, a brother, Ed Frazier, and a sister, Mrs. Minnie Shankles, both of Oklahoma, and 5 grandchildren.
Oh, that is so interesting that she died just a little bit before her husband, and they'd been separated for several years just by the miles because he was in Oklahoma in an institution at the Oklahoma State Hospital, and she's out in California with living with her daughter's family. But kind of a sad thing about Allie was that her daughter also died before her. So my grandmother, Ettie Belle, had a heart condition, a rheumatic heart. So it was a blessing that Allie was living with them because she really took care of all the household things in the family while her daughter was ailing and then eventually passed away. But even though her daughter had died, she stayed living with the family. And so, they really did stick together. This family did. Well, the children of Claude, Doc, H. Harris, and Alice Frazier, the oldest son was Bert Cecil, who was born September 29th at 1905 in Marietta, Chickasaw Nation, Indian Territory. And he married Ada Jewel Williamson on April 22nd, 1924 in Lubbock County and died November 30th, 1982 in Norman, Cleveland County, Oklahoma. So he pretty much stayed in that area all of his life. Then Ettie Belle Harris, who was my grandmother, was born March 28th, 1907 in Pike near Marietta, Chickasaw Nation. And she married Charles Leslie Schultz on April 23rd, 1924 in Lubbock County, Texas. And then she died May 22nd, 1954 in Sanger, Fresno County, California. And then there were the 2 children that died, a boy who was born between January 1908 and April 1910 in Love County and died before that 1910 census in Love County. And then another boy who was born 1917 in Love County and died before January 1920, that census. So it would be neat if we could someday find more information about those children that passed away. But they likely just had little burial plots, maybe just with a small marker that perhaps hasn't survived, or, maybe they didn't even have much of a marker at all. It's hard to know if we could ever find anything about those burials.
Yeah. And I also wonder how long they lived, if they were stillborn. All we know is that on the hospital records, it says that the babies were born in, well, one I could clearly read said 1917, and the other one I don't think I could read. I think it looked like 1909, but I wasn't sure if it was a 1908 or 1909.
And I feel like if these children had lived a little bit longer, it would have come down in the family. I think my
Yeah.
grandpa and grandma, they would have mentioned it. My dad was doing family history and asking all about the family. And if that had been a family story, I'm pretty sure it would have come down that, oh, yeah, there was like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, because on my grandpa's family, he had 2 older brothers that died. And that came down in the family. They were 2 and 3 when they died. So it
Yeah.
makes me
So,
feel like maybe it was
mm.
infant.
Yeah. And maybe they didn't even give them a name. If they were stillborn or if they died really soon, that would make sense.
Right. Yeah.
So that's our hypothesis about that. But anyway, so thank you for reading through the child list in the kinship determination project. You have the format for it is that you introduce the like main person in generation 1 or 2, whatever. Each generation you start over with this same format, but you list the name of the person, you list their spouse or spouses if they were married more than once, and then after that you have like their biographical information, the life story of that person. And then after the life story, you have a child list. And this is where you have the children of Doc and Allie were, and then you list them, and you have each of them has a number, and it's like a lowercase Roman numeral. It's for the children numbering. And then anyone that you're carrying forward, you give them a number, the identification number, and a plus to show that they're carried forward. And so I ended up adding these two children to the child list because, when I was really analyzing all the documents I had about Doc, I had looked at his medical records, which we had received. Mom had ordered them a while ago, and they were really hard to read, even though they were typewritten. So it was really interesting to really comb through those and try to figure out everything that they were saying and realize at one point, oh my gosh, this says that there were two more boys born to their family, and we hadn't ever really added them to the tree or like really known that they were there, So that was an interesting discovery to make as I was writing this KDP. And it just kind of goes to show that even though you might have gathered a lot of sources about your family, it kind of takes writing about everything, writing things up to really fully understand everything about them. And so that was really neat to put those children in the child list. And it was neat to learn more about Alice Frazier Harris, my great-great-grandmother, as I wrote about her family. And she was a spouse of Doc Harris, who was my second generation main person. And so the topic for that second generation was not really about her, but in the kinship determination project, you can put in kind of like a shorter biography of the spouse. And so that's what I had done. And anyway, it's kind of hard to research one person without researching the spouse because they live together and stuff. But I did need to research Allie's parents a little bit for her section of the biography. So it was really neat to learn about her and to really see this part of her nature coming out as just like such a devoted mother and nurturer to others, especially to her grandchildren and to Christine, who was her son-in-law's sister. So it was just really neat to see her in that light and to think about that on Mother's Day of this year.
Well, I'm so glad you wrote that up. And it would be neat to do a whole history really focusing more on her, because I'm sure there were things that you wanted to put in here, but because of the page limit, you couldn't include, right? To develop more about her and her place in her family. And,
right.
It'd be neat to write these kinship determination projects about all of our ancestors, give them really thorough coverage.
Yes, it would be great. I love writing projects like this where you get to really dive deep and discover more sources and things. And we'll have to do additional podcast episodes about some of those other sources that I found that were really neat, especially my research trip to Love County, Oklahoma. I feel like now that I've passed the first part of my application that it's like exciting to talk about the KDP, whereas before I was nervous to talk about it because what if I didn't pass? So now I feel like I can write more blog posts about it.
Good.
And share all the fun things that I discovered. So,
that's great.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you have a great week, and we will talk to you again next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope that something you heard today will help you make progress in your research. If you want to learn more, purchase our books, Research Like a Pro and Research Like a Pro with DNA on Amazon.com and other booksellers. You can also register for our online courses or study groups of the same names. Learn more at familylocket.com/services. To share your progress and ask questions, join our private Facebook group by sending us your book receipt or joining our courses. To get updates in your email inbox each Monday, subscribe to our newsletter at familylocket.com/newsletter. Please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. We read each review and are so thankful for them. We hope you'll start now to research like a pro.